Hey, well, welcome back to 996 The Howl. What a wild send off for Glendale and the season as a whole. Crazy, going down 4-0, and the despair of being a Coyotes fan sinks in immediately. But the underdog team scratches, claws, stays in the game, works hard, pushes a little bit further and further, and they win 5-4. After that fifth goal by Gostisbehere, the building just blew up. Whoever was there at the game, just congratulations. They should have given you some sort of medal or t-shirt as a commemorative experience of that game, and sticking with the team as with the team who stuck with the game as well. I know, this season we kind of just want to move on quickly, but we got a record keep. We got to see where we started and maybe some improvements somewhere. But let's just get into it. It was obviously set up for failure. The point of this whole season was to get the best lottery odds available. They fail at that. They get the second best lottery odds available. They finished with 57 points, just 1 point above their worst season in 2015 with 56 points, where they drafted Dylan Strome in the McDavid draft. So let's get into it. Let's compare it to last season. I know it's different scenarios. Rick Tocchet wasn't in a rebuild. They were pushing for a playoff spot. They failed, and he had to go. And a lot of changes and a lot of talent left the team. But, some of these statistics show that, maybe they're a little bit better, and they will get better than where they reached with Tocchet, which was a first-round exit. So their points percentage obviously really down, but their goals for at 2.57 compared to last year, which was at 2.68. So they're scoring at almost the same pace as under Rick Tocchet, which I find sort of true. There's games where they score 9, obviously to inflate that number, and a lot of games where they only score 1 and lose like 5-1 or 6-1 or 9-1. So, they score, not so much, but it's there. And there's times in the season where they score easily, just like last night. They scored 5 goals. And other games where if they're playing well and they're feeling it and they're confident, they can put in a lot of goals. So that's the difference between Tocchet, where it was a struggle almost every game to get over the third goal mark. Goals against, really bad, 3.82. I think this team is completely worse defensively, and their goaltending is much worse, and special teams much worse under Tourney than Rick Tocchet. But I think the offense and some of the career years these players have, and the respect and joy to play for this new coach and Andre Tourney, is better than Tocchet. Obviously, with better talent coming in and a season where it's not a complete teardown, those numbers will get better. Their defensive structure will get better, and their PK, it started out really bad at the 20-game mark. It was around 67%. Their goals for mark at the 20-game mark of the season was under 2. It was 1.85. PK was at 67%. Their save percentage was .892. So save percentage stayed the same. Their power play stayed around 14% from the 20-game mark, but if you eliminate those first 20 games, their goals for increased dramatically. Like I said, going from 1.85 at the 20-game mark to finishing at 2.57. So if they had a better start to the season, which they will next season, because it's not a completely whole new team with all these new players, I need to learn a whole new coaching system, they're going to eclipse this goals for mark from the 2021 season next season for sure. But power play was pretty bad. PK improved from 67% to 75%, but still has a little bit of ways to go. Their save percentage, almost the same as last season, but that save percentage last season was the reason why they missed the playoffs, and it sent the team in this direction to rebuild and tear down. So the save percentage needs to be up a bit more. Vejmelka needs to not play so many games, so they need to go out and get a goaltender who could take the load off Vejmelka. Vejmelka seems like a 45, 50 game guy, not a plus 60 game guy. Credit to Satiri for those 2 games against Dallas and Nashville. Came in relief against Nashville and shut the door. Had a bit of a shaky start against Dallas, but shut the door, allowed the team to get back into it. So props to him. because before those 2 games, he was the best Swiss cheese impersonator. Shooting percentage, just a little bit down, 9.7 compared to 9.8. They're really high in sort of some of these months in March and February where they would score at will. You know, they had those games against Ottawa and Detroit where they're just killing it with the goals, and then victories against New Jersey where they had like 16 shots and 4 goals, and you know, some other games where they had very low shot totals. I think even in the Montreal victory in Montreal, they had about 20 shots and 4 goals. So really efficient on the shooting percentage. It's been down, up and down, but you know, league average is 9.8, so they're an average team in terms of converting shots into goals. Their possession numbers are really bad. This team doesn't really like to possess the puck. I wonder if that's by design, if Tourney wants to go the route of Minnesota and the Rangers, who are always bad possession teams, but they score at will, they're very efficient, and they get pucks to the net quickly. But I just think it's a lack of talent in the lineup to hold on to the puck for so long, especially with Clayton Keller injured around the 70-game mark. I think Keller is pretty much the only guy who loves to carry the puck in the offensive zone and make plays with the puck. They really don't have anyone on the roster yet who could do it like Clayton Keller. Goal differential, terrible, minus 106 compared to minus 24. I'm going to start having this stat up when I do these milestone, reviews or 20-game marks, because that's to me a strong indicator of whether you're a playoff team or not. If you're a playoff team, you're well above 0 in the positives. Very rarely you're in a negative and finish in the playoffs. I know Dallas did it this season at minus 8, but usually as the season goes along, if you find yourself in the negatives in the teens or 20s, you're not going to make the playoffs. You need to have a really good goal differential, and it's a strong indicator you're having a good season and you'll pretty much make the playoffs. And then fights. They had only 10 last season. Obviously a shortened season, 56 games, on pace for 14 fights if it was a full 82-game season. So the fact that they almost doubled 14 with 28, 7th in the league in fights. They're at 24 fights at the 60-game mark. So in the past 22 games, only 4 fights, and that's because Liam O'Brien got injured and he missed a whole bunch of time. He got injured in February, missed about 18 or 20 games, and last couple games we had Mama in the lineup. He just had his first fight against Nashville last night, but O'Brien was mixing it up. With O'Brien in the lineup, there's usually a fight, there's usually a fisticuffs. You really felt the team missed that edge and physicality when O'Brien got injured. Yes, they brought in Nick Ritchie and Nate Smith and McBain who would throw bodies, but they didn't really up the temperature and get the other team riled up into scrums. O'Brien does that, and Imama does that. We'll see what happens next season. O'Brien is extended. Not sure about Imama's contract. He's probably still signed for next year. I didn't check that, but both of them playing at the same time on the same night on the same line. Not a fan of that. I would like them to rotate. Give each one a rest. They're enforcers, but they don't really score much, and they don't really do anything offensively, even though they're involved in that first goal last night against Nashville. But one of them in the lineup, when we get a healthy Nick Ritchie in the lineup, when Nate Smith and McBain grow into their bodies and become more physical, that's the type of physicality I like. Lawson Krause, a prime example. Hopefully Christian Fischer gets more physical as he grows, and maybe he re-signs a contract with the Coyotes. I like physical players that play on an edge but could also score. Yes, you need an enforcer, but only one, and not every game. When you have an enforcer in your lineup every game, usually you only dress that enforcer for games where the coach knows that they need some emotion or it's going to be a tough battle against another physical team. They'll usually dress their enforcer. Month to month, obviously started horrible. No wins in the first 12 games. Going 0-8-1 in October, and then in November they started to pick it up. They had that stretch, like 4 games where they beat St. Louis, Barrett Hayden scored 2 goals, and then lost to Columbus in overtime or a shootout, and then beat Detroit, beat LA. It was like 4 games in a row, them getting points. It didn't happen at all for the first, 20 games or so. So that was a good month. And then December, not a lot of games played due to the shutdown around the league. 1-5-1. January was better, 4-8-1. And then in February, they start that 8-game homestand, and that's where the season kind of turned. And I felt that the team was playing really well. They go 4-6-0, not bad, almost 500 hockey for a team that was like completely tear down in talent and having scraps and anchors almost on every line. They stuck together, they stuck with it. You actually saw the Andre Tourigny system come to fruition, and they were playing good hockey. They were in almost every game. They were competitive. It continued into March, where they had they went 6-0-1 or 6-1 to start the month of March. They were scoring at will. That's the games where they beat Detroit like a 9-1. Against Ottawa, it was like 8-4. They went into Toronto and won. Went into Montreal and won. They were 6-1. I think they lost when they went into Boston, and then obviously after that they go on a bit of a skid, and then near the end of March, Clayton Keller gets injured. I believe it was March 31st. I was at that game, and then the wheels fell off going from March to April. They go on a 10-game losing streak, going 0-8-2. It looked like the team was dead in the water. They had no emotion. They couldn't get it together. They had all these injuries. They had all these Tucson Roadrunners injected into the lineup. They couldn't win. They had McBain and Smith in the lineup. Like I said, they go 0-8-2. Some of these losses were brutal. You had 5-1 loss against the Blues, 5-1 loss against Vancouver, 7-1 loss against Vancouver, 9-1 loss against Calgary. To start the month of April was really bad, and in terms of the tank and best lottery odds, it was a good indicator that we were going to finish bad and last place. But somehow, someway, the last 4 games of the season, they start to turn it on. Even before that, they had that 2-goal third period against Carolina. They came back against Chicago, down 3-1, forced overtime and lost. They were down 4-1 against the Blues, pushed overtime and lost. They beat Minnesota straight out. They came back down 3-0 against Dallas and won. They came back down 4-0 against Nashville and won. So, if you're not thinking about the tank, that's a good way to end the season. It shows me that Keller injury kind of wrecked the whole locker room. There were so many other injuries around that time too, like Krause and Richie got injured. Like I mentioned, O'Brien, Krause was injured. And then you had all these Tucson guys coming in. It felt like they were starting the season over again. All these new young guys had to relearn the system. They had to mesh well. Once they started to gain some chemistry and they started to put together good hockey games, and they were familiar with the coaching system, they started to play consistently good hockey and competitive once again. So you see those trends to start the season, terrible, all these new players, whole new coaching system. November, they start to get better. December, take a step back. And then January, February, March, they start playing some good, consistent hockey. And then, like I said, all the injuries, it all falls apart, but they pick it back up and build it in the last 5 games of the season. So, moving forward for next season, I don't know which direction they're going to go just yet. Whether they go for the tank or whether they just play it out and have a season sort of like Buffalo and Ottawa and Chicago this season, where they finished below the playoff line, but they had some good stretches and they played competitive hockey throughout. And there was some try and effort consistently throughout the season. It wasn't a total rebuild and tear down. So maybe we see that next season. But with the coaching system in place, with hearing the players talk about the coaching staff and how it's such a joy to play for the coach, they make them feel good. Seeing the career years of Keller, Schmaltz, Krause, and Travis Boyd, and Gostisbehere, getting his career back on track. The only kind of disappointment I found was Chychrun. He really didn't thrive. I don't know if that's so much on the coach or him personally and mentally. He's a gamer. He wants to be in the playoffs. He wants to compete. And maybe, it was hard pill to swallow. His best friend and Christian Dvorak was traded. He was really hurt by that. Hopefully next season, he's on the team. I think Maybe if they trade Gossespierre or Chikrin, it signals to me they want to tank and go for high odds again. But it's a bit too early for that. Let's just enjoy, what happened. And I'm confident in Andre Tourigny, and hearing the players being so happy to play for him and seeing their success offensively. Under Talking, you rarely saw good offensive seasons. The only exceptions were Chikrin last season with 20 goals, and Connor Garland took big steps each year, but other than that, Schmaltz wasn't really doing well. Keller wasn't doing well. Kraus. So to have those type of players have big steps this season offensively, it's a good sign to me moving forward. And then divisional matchups. Not no team in their division really had their number. If I were to pick some, I would say Minnesota and Winnipeg. That win against Winnipeg, it was 1-0 victory. I'm pretty sure Winnipeg had like 50 shots and just dominated the Coyotes all game, but still lost. And then Minnesota, that game where they won 5-3, just a couple of days ago, I think Minnesota just took them too lightly. Even in that game, Minnesota scored 2 goals in like 40 seconds, and they do that a lot against the Coyotes. So, Minnesota's still that boogeyman, but, seeing that record against the Avalanche, 2-1-1 after last season, going like 2-6-1 or something. It's sad that you don't play these teams like 8 times like last season. They went 1-7 against Minnesota last season. So, they don't play these teams as much. The spark and the rivalry isn't really there. Remember that 7-game series last season against St. Louis, really sparked the rivalry, but this season, kind of tough to reignite that rivalry when you're only playing 4 games in the season. But Dallas was pretty good. Chicago was, they played really well against Chicago. They usually win, and it's usually an entertaining game when they face Chicago. But, it's good that they were able to get wins from every team. They had competitive games against teams. They derailed Nashville's playoff positions last night. The fact that they had an implication in where Nashville finished in the standings, and now Nashville has to face the Avalanche just because of the Coyotes coming back from 4-0. I mean, they must feel good. That's something to carry over into the summer, saying, hey, we affected this team so much that, maybe they're obviously going to get knocked out by the Avalanche, but, maybe if they faced Calgary, they could have won that series. That would have been a more physical, high-intensity matchup, whereas Nashville and the Avalanche plays with speed. Sure, they're big and heavy, but they want to score and beat you offensively first. If you want to throw fisticuffs with the Avalanche, they could, but that's not their go-to game plan. Whereas Nashville, I feel they beat you down, they grind you out, and it's a different play style than the Avalanche. But I feel like Calgary matches up with Nashville better than the Avalanche. But it's their first time in the Central Division. Didn't mention that. This season was kind of like a whole bunch of things, not even talking about all the off-ice issues with Glendale trying to lock them out, the Coyotes making a power move to not pay their debts on time and to try to push the envelope with Glendale, and then, trying to find a temporary solution, submitting the proposal for the new Tempe Arena, which still hasn't been accepted and needs to be accepted immediately. First season in the Central. I miss those rivalries against the California teams. I don't really miss the Canadian teams as much. That's fine. But, they got to start building these rivalries with these new teams. Nashville's been around the past 10 years with the Coyotes. 2012 playoffs, the Coyotes defeated them and knocked them out. The COVID bubble, the Coyotes defeated them and moved on to the playoffs. And then, last game of the season, the Coyotes determined the Predators' playoffs position. So, Coyotes kind of have that Nashville number. There's not really a rivalry just yet, but that's one to look out for. I think fans remember all those big moments against Nashville, so that's a rivalry I can see happening. And then Chicago, whenever the Blackhawks come into town, it's always red jerseys in the crowd. We'll see what happens in the new Tempe Arena. Maybe all those visitors won't afford the tickets, and it'll just be like, local fans of Arizona. We'll see what happens with that. I'm interested to see, because usually out-of-town fans, they could grab cheap tickets compared to their hometown team, whereas now with Tempe, with the prices increased, like doubled or tripled, I wonder if visitors make the trip out to Arizona or they just stay back and it's more, Tempe locals, downtown Phoenix, Scottsdale fans who purchase those tickets and fill up those 5,000 seats. So, it was a rough season. They didn't really succeed in getting the best lottery odds, but they did get the second best lottery odds. It all comes down to luck. Honestly, they had one of their worst seasons, 1 point ahead of that 2015 season. Montreal they did it. I mean, it was so unexpected and they just rolled with the tank once they realized, the season wasn't heading in the right direction. But, I think there's some good positives here with the Coyotes, considering the roster they had, Eriksson, Roussel, Andrew Ladd, Galchenyuk. Like, I'm excited for those players to be off the team, maybe not Roussel. And I should have added Beagle in there as well, but not that I want Beagle back, I want him gone. But maybe Roussel is like one of the only guys I would take back. More of an Energizer bunny, scrums it up a little bit, but I'm excited for those anchors to be removed and see maybe some of these Tucson Roadrunners, made a case and are on the team next year. Maybe they go after some free agents. Excited to see how the makeup of the team moves forward. And I think they got a pretty good team next season. I'm not expecting playoffs, but if they don't really trade anyone important, they could finish, maybe 10th last, have a season, like I said, like Buffalo, Ottawa, where they just have fun and put together some good games, and it's not really so disparaging to watch, and it's actually exciting. So that's the review. Yeah, it was bad. It was rough. We stuck with it. Congratulations for sticking through it all and watching all the games if you did. If you didn't, it's understandable. There are stretches of time where it was really hard to watch. The beginning of the season and then, that 10-game losing streak once Keller got injured kind of, killed the mojo of the fan base and the team. But they picked it up in the end, and we could go in the summer with some positivity and some good comeback wins that we could feel good about, and against some good opponents as well. So that's it for me. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, spread the word. And as always, thank you for your support.